The North Carolina Department of Transportation welcomes you to this public meeting for the Complete 540 project. We hope you will find today's meeting informative, and we hope you will share your comments, questions, and suggestions with us once you have reviewed the display materials. The Complete 540 project would complete 540, connecting the southern end of the Triangle Expressway near Apex with the eastern end of the existing I-540 near Knightdale. This new highway is needed to help maintain mobility in the region. As the region continues to grow, traffic volumes are expected to increase significantly. Completing 540 would provide a high-speed, fully access-controlled facility, reducing the need for motorists to travel on smaller, more local roads when making regional trips. Before a new highway can be built, however, it must be carefully planned and studied. Various route locations must be laid out. Their levels of impact on people and the natural environment must be evaluated, and these findings must be shared with the public for comment and discussion. These steps are carried out during what is known as the environmental study process. It is only after these steps have occurred, at the end of the study process, that a final decision can be made about whether the project should be approved for construction. One of the most important parts of this process is to make sure that the public's viewpoints about the project are understood and considered. The Department of Transportation will carefully consider all public comments received, whether those comments were made during past public events or at the current meetings. You will hear more about how you can provide your comments at the end of this presentation. For large projects like Complete 540, the North Carolina Department of Transportation works with the Federal Highway Administration and other federal agencies to meet the requirements of the National Environmental Policy Act, also known as NEPA. This law must be followed when a project would include federal funding. NEPA includes the preparation of a document called an Environmental Impact Statement. This document is a summary of all the information developed over the course of the study process. The first, or draft version of this document, will include the need for the project and its objectives, important features of the study area's natural and human environment, the various alternatives that have been developed and compared to meet the project's objectives, and the anticipated benefits and impacts of each of those alternatives. The final environmental impact statement also includes a summary of all the comments, questions, and concerns made by the public, local governments, and state and federal agencies over the course of the study. The reason we carry out this detailed environmental study process is to make sure that all who are involved in making decisions about the project are fully informed about the location and design of the project, about how it would affect people and the environment, and about whether there are any better alternatives before any resources are committed to building the project. If, after all the studies are complete, the decision is made to approve the project, it would then move on to the final design phase. This is when the final detailed construction plans are drawn and environmental permits are acquired. This is followed by the purchase of the land required for the highway's right-of-way based on these detailed design plans. Once the necessary right-of-way has been purchased, construction of the project can begin. It is important to note that at the present time, the only phase of the Complete 540 project with dedicated funding is the current environmental study. Funding has not yet been identified for future project phases. If the current study results in approval of the project, additional funding sources such as tolling will be considered. We are now well into the study process. We have studied growth projections and traffic forecasts and determined that completion of 540 is the best solution for many of the mobility needs in the region. We have collected and reviewed a great deal of information about the natural and human environment in the study area, and we have drawn up several alternative route locations for the highway based on those environmental factors. And we have calculated the community and environmental impacts for each of these alternatives at a general or preliminary level of detail, and are implementing an ongoing public and agency involvement program. We are now at the point where we need to select a smaller number of route alternatives for detailed study. Once those alternatives are selected, and their benefits and impacts have been calculated more precisely, one can be chosen as the preferred route for completing 540. The first set of alternative routes was presented at a series of public meetings in the fall of 2010. They were also presented to the state and federal agencies that have a responsibility to review the study's progress. Each of the individual segments that make up the alternative routes were given different colors as a way of identifying them. Based on comments received by both the public and the reviewing agencies, some of the alternatives were removed from further consideration, and others were added. Now, let's review the corridors currently under consideration. The Orange Corridor is a route that was identified and protected during preliminary studies for the project in the mid-1990s. Today, several other options are also being considered. The Red Corridor crosses the study area along a path farther north than the other alternatives. It was included at the request of federal agencies because it was seen as a shorter route that could possibly reduce impacts to the natural environment, including wetlands. It would also likely avoid habitat of a protected species of mussel that is present in other route locations. Even though this corridor has some environmental advantages, it would have a substantial impact on neighborhoods and other community features in the town of Garner. As a result, the Department of Transportation's study team worked closely with the Capital Area Metropolitan Planning Organization and other local and agency stakeholders to find a suitable alternative to the Red Corridor, one that would minimize both natural resource impacts and impacts to communities. Despite these efforts, the agencies concluded that the Red Corridor must also be studied in detail and its impacts on natural resources and communities be compared to the other route alternatives. For that reason, the Red Corridor is being recommended as one of the alternatives for detailed study. In the search for alternatives to the Red Corridor, one segment was developed that may also reduce wetland impacts. This segment has been designated as the Lilac Corridor. It was found that by connecting other previously studied corridors to the Lilac segment, wetland impacts could be reduced to a degree similar to the other corridors being evaluated. As a result, this segment is being recommended as one of the alternatives for detailed study. Two corridor alternatives in the western part of the study area, the Blue and Purple corridors, were removed from further consideration in November 2010 because they did not provide an advantage over other options under consideration at that time. Today, the Purple corridor and a modified portion of the Blue corridor are again being studied. This is because it was found that connecting Purple to Blue and then to the new Lilac corridor creates an alternative that also minimizes wetland impacts similar to other corridors being evaluated. For this reason, the combination known as the Purple-Blue-Lilac corridor is being recommended for detailed study. To this point, we've focused on corridors located west of I-40. Now, we'll turn our attention to the corridors between I-40 and the eastern end of the existing I-540. The original corridor in this area is the Green Corridor. Although it wasn't protected, it was developed at the same time as the Orange Corridor during preliminary studies in the 1990s. The current study is now examining certain variations that may reduce impacts to the human and natural environment in this area. The Tan Corridor was developed because it reduces impacts to a planned public development. The Mint Green Corridor would also reduce impacts to the planned public development and would displace fewer homes and businesses than the Tan Corridor. The Brown Corridor would completely avoid the planned public development, but would impact a public wastewater treatment facility and a police training center. The Teal Corridor is a short connector between the Green Corridor and the Brown Corridor, creating another route for 540 between I-40 and the existing I-540. The green, tan, mint green, brown, and teal corridors are being recommended for detailed study because each would provide certain advantages over other alternatives. In total, there are 10 color-coded segments that the Department of Transportation is recommending be studied in detail. These combine to create 17 end-to-end route alternatives. The impact each alternative would have on the natural and human environment has been calculated at a general or preliminary level as presented on display materials here today. This impact assessment information will be developed at a much greater level of detail for the routes designated as detailed study alternatives. One of the most important purposes of today's meeting is to hear your thoughts on these corridors. The Department of Transportation will carefully consider all public comments received on these corridors, whether those comments were made during past public events or in conjunction with today's meeting. We will also carefully consider comments received from local governments, non-governmental organizations, and state and federal agencies. Once all those comments have been reviewed, the Department of Transportation will work with the Federal Highway Administration to decide if the corridors presented here today should each be studied in greater detail. The results of those detailed studies will be contained in the project's draft environmental impact statement, which is expected to be ready in about 18 months. At that time, formal public hearings will be held to receive comments on the impacts and benefits of the detailed study corridors. The study will conclude with the selection of one preferred corridor and the preparation of the final version of the environmental impact statement. This statement will document the selection of the preferred alternative and the dropping of the others that were studied in detail. As the Complete 540 project moves forward, we encourage you to participate actively, and there are several different ways you can do this. You may complete a written comment form. Your completed form can be submitted to us today or can be provided at a later date. All comments regarding today's meeting should be submitted by Friday, November 15th, in order to be considered prior to finalizing the detailed study alternatives. The complete mailing address is included in your handout. If you need assistance in completing this form, a study team representative will gladly help you. You may provide your comments to us by using the study's website at www.ncdot.gov/complete540. You may email us directly using complete540@ncdot.gov, or you can take advantage of our toll-free hotline at 1-800-554-7849. You can also keep up to date on the status of the study by visiting our project weblog at complete540.blogspot.com. Your comments and questions are important to us, and we look forward to your continued participation in the Complete 540 study.